There comes a moment in every inner journey when a quiet realization rises from within, as if the soul itself is asking whether the life being lived truly reflects the depth of what the heart desires. It is not a loud moment or an extravagant awakening. It is a subtle awareness that you have been moving through days filled with obligations, noise, expectations, and the weight of unspoken disappointments, while a softer voice inside whispers that something essential has been neglected. Many people reach this threshold after years of giving too much, settling too often, or convincing themselves that wanting more is a sign of arrogance rather than a natural expression of the spirit's longing for expansion. This inner conflict creates a tension between the life that feels familiar and the life that feels truthful, and it is in this tension that the journey of manifestation truly begins. This video is an invitation to step out of habitual acceptance and enter a state of alignment where you no longer negotiate your worth in exchange for temporary comfort. Instead of chasing quick fixes or repeating techniques without understanding, you will be guided through a deeper, more contemplative process that honors your emotional landscape and reconnects you with the wisdom already present within you. Throughout this journey, you will explore the invisible patterns that shaped your beliefs, the emotional wounds that kept you small, and the untapped strength waiting for permission to emerge. By the end, you will understand why accepting crumbs has never been your destiny, and how the universe responds when you finally step into the fullness of who you were always meant to be. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that settles into the body when a person spends years believing they must earn every fragment of affection, opportunity, or recognition that life occasionally offers. It is the exhaustion of someone who, consciously or not, learned to survive on emotional scraps, hoping that one day a larger portion would finally appear. This exhaustion does not always show itself through dramatic breakdowns. Sometimes it hides beneath functioning routines, polite smiles, or the belief that life is simply meant to be endured rather than shaped. When people reach this stage, it is not because they lack strength, intelligence, or spiritual depth, but because they have been conditioned to shrink their desires to fit environments that never had the capacity to hold their true expansion. It becomes nearly impossible to manifest anything meaningful when the internal narrative tells you that you should be grateful for whatever comes, even if it barely sustains you. The deeper truth, however, is that settling becomes a habit long before it becomes a pattern. It begins in subtle places. The moment you silence your needs to avoid disappointing someone you care about, the moment you accept behavior that quietly wounds you because confrontation feels too heavy, or the moment you convince yourself that a small opportunity is good enough because a greater one feels too distant or unrealistic. These tiny concessions accumulate inside the subconscious, shaping the energetic signature you emit to the world. Over time, the universe responds not to the words you speak, but to the energy you embody. And if your energy communicates that crumbs are acceptable, then crumbs are exactly what continue to arrive. This chapter invites a more thoughtful examination of how a person becomes disconnected from their rightful sense of deserving. It is not unusual for someone to believe they want abundance while simultaneously feeling unworthy of it. This contradiction creates an internal separation between desire and embodiment, preventing manifestation from unfolding. Many adults carry unresolved emotional memories, experiences of loss, abandonment, criticism, or lack of support that created a belief that wanting too much leads to disappointment. The psyche, trying to protect itself, chooses what feels safe rather than what feels aligned. Safety is found in the familiar, even when the familiar is small. Alignment, however, requires stepping into spaces where the soul is allowed to expand without apology. To break this cycle, it becomes essential to observe the moments when you instinctively minimize yourself. Sometimes it happens in conversations where you hesitate to speak your truth because you fear being misunderstood. Other times it occurs when you apologize excessively, even when you did nothing wrong. It may appear in the relationships you choose, especially when you gravitate toward people who demand more from you than they give, reinforcing the belief that you must overextend yourself to be worthy of love. Each of these small acts reinforces an identity rooted in scarcity, not abundance. Manifestation cannot flourish within a foundation that insists on survival when the soul is longing for expansion. The process of transformation begins with a willingness to witness your own patterns without turning them into self-blame. This is a crucial distinction, You are not responsible for the wounds that shaped you, but you are responsible for recognizing when those wounds are dictating your life. Acknowledging this truth requires humility and courage. It means admitting that the life you are living may not reflect the life you desire, not because you failed, but because you adapted. Adaptation was necessary then. Alignment is necessary now. Once awareness begins to form, the next step is to rebuild your internal sense of worth from a grounded place, rather than through external validation. You must learn to treat yourself as if you are already the person you are trying to become. This involves cultivating rituals that reconnect you with your inner voice. Moments of silence, intentional reflection, and the willingness to hear the discomfort beneath the surface. Many people attempt to manifest from a place of desperation or urgency, but manifestation becomes powerful only when the internal field is steady and clear. You cannot call in what you are not willing to hold. Another important aspect of this journey is understanding that your desires are not random. They are invitations from the universe, signaling the direction of your soul's expansion. When you deny these desires by accepting less, you do not simply delay your transformation. You create emotional dissonance that affects your energy and overall well-being. The universe does not punish you for this, but it will continue to reflect the vibration you project. When you begin to honor your desires as sacred, everything around you starts to shift. Opportunities feel more aligned, relationships feel more balanced, and intuition becomes more pronounced. This is not accidental, it is resonance. As you move through this chapter, you may notice emotions rising: sadness for the times you settled, anger for the moments you were unseen, or grief for the dreams you neglected. Allow these emotions to surface without resistance. They are not signs of failure, but indicators that your inner landscape is preparing for renewal. Healing does not require speed, it requires presence. You are not trying to erase your past, but to understand it deeply enough that it no longer dictates the limits of your future. The path toward manifesting a grander reality begins here, in the quiet yet powerful decision to stop accepting what does not nourish your spirit. You are stepping into a new identity, one that acknowledges your worth, your capacity, and your inherent connection to the universe. When this shift happens from within, your external world will eventually mirror it. The transformation may not be immediate, but it will be unmistakable, because it will emerge from the fullness you no longer deny. There is a quiet moment in every awakening, when a person realizes that the life they have been living has been shaped more by fear than by intention. It usually arrives unexpectedly, in the middle of an ordinary day, like a soft but undeniable awareness settling into the body. It may come while standing in line at a grocery store, sitting alone in a parked car, or waking up before sunrise when the world is still silent enough for truth to be heard. In that moment, something inside whispers that the constant sense of being stuck, unseen, or unfulfilled has little to do with external circumstances and everything to do with the internal limits built over years of emotional survival. This realization is not dramatic. It is intimate, almost sacred, because it marks the beginning of a deeper inquiry into why you have accepted so little from a life that once felt full of possibility. Much of this disconnect comes from a long history of adapting to environments that could not meet your emotional or spiritual needs. When you grow accustomed to being the one who smooths conflicts, carries burdens, or sacrifices dreams for the comfort of others, the subconscious begins to equate self-abandonment with harmony. This creates a subtle form of loyalty to your own limitation. You do not choose crumbs because you want them. You choose them because the nervous system has learned to fear what comes after wanting more. Over time, the body becomes familiar with disappointment, so it unconsciously gravitates towards situations that replicate that emotional pattern, believing them to be safer than the uncertainty of expansion. This internal conflict creates a unique struggle. Part of you longs for a life aligned with authenticity and purpose, while another part clings to what is predictable, even if it hurts. Manifestation becomes difficult not because you lack clarity, but because you have not yet reconciled these two parts of yourself. The longing for more becomes tangled with old fears, making even your deepest desires feel dangerous. This tension often manifests as hesitation, procrastination, or an inability to act on opportunities that appear. You might tell yourself the timing is wrong, that you are not ready, or that your dreams are too unrealistic. But beneath these rationalizations lives a quieter truth. You have never been taught how to feel safe in abundance. To move past this stage, one must first acknowledge the emotional weight carried through a lifetime of subtle betrayals, not from others, but from the self. These betrayals happen in the moments when you said yes to something that drained you, when you held silence to avoid being judged, or when you convinced yourself that your needs were too large, too intense, or too inconvenient. Each of these choices was made with the hope of preserving connection or stability, but collectively, they created distance between who you are and who you are meant to become. The journey toward manifesting a grander reality requires you to begin closing that distance, not by force, but by gradually returning to the truth you abandoned for survival. This return begins with presence. Presence is the ability to sit with your emotions, fear, grief, longing, disappointment, without rushing to escape them. In the absence of presence, you remain fused with old patterns, reacting automatically rather than consciously choosing your direction. Many individuals struggle here because presence can feel like stepping into a room filled with memories they avoided for years. Yet it is this willingness to witness yourself fully that opens the door to transformation. When you stop running from your own emotional landscape, you create space for new possibilities to emerge. Presence also allows you to discern between the voice of your intuition and the voice of your fear. Intuition speaks with a quiet certainty that encourages expansion, while fear often shouts predictions of failure or loss. Without presence, these voices blend, making it difficult to trust yourself. But when you become familiar with the sensations of your own inner guidance, the calmness in your chest, the clarity in your thinking, the sense of alignment behind your choices, the pathway forward becomes more visible. Manifestation is not solely about asking the universe for what you want. It is about learning to recognize and follow the signals that guide you toward it. Another layer of this journey involves examining the narratives you inherited about worthiness and desire. Many people were raised to believe that wanting more is a sign of greed, that ambition must be tempered with modesty, or that suffering is spiritually noble. These beliefs were often passed down through generations marked by scarcity, hardship, or limited opportunity. If your family or environment equated survival with virtue, you may have internalized the idea that abundance is suspicious or unsafe. But the truth is that abundance does not corrupt. It reveals. It reveals where you still fear losing control, where you still hold guilt around receiving, and where you have not yet learned to trust yourself with power. Releasing these beliefs requires a shift from seeing abundance as an external resource to recognizing it as an internal state. When you begin to cultivate an inner sense of sufficiency, a quiet knowing that you deserve a life that reflects your depth, your energy transforms. You stop chasing validation or clinging to relationships that cannot meet you. You stop bargaining with your own potential. You begin to understand that manifestation is not about convincing the universe to give you what you want, but about aligning with the version of yourself who is already capable of receiving it. As this alignment deepens, you start to notice small but significant changes. Your desires become clearer, your boundaries become firmer, and your emotional responses become more grounded. You no longer feel compelled to prove your worth or shrink your presence to avoid discomfort. Instead, you move through life with a steadiness that comes from knowing you are connected to something larger than circumstance. This is not arrogance, it is alignment, and alignment naturally attracts experiences that honor your truth. A new reality begins to form, not instantly or dramatically, but in consistent and meaningful ways. Opportunities that once felt distant become accessible. Conversations take deeper shapes. The people who enter your life reflect a higher level of consciousness. Synchronicities appear not as rare coincidences, but as confirmation that you are finally moving in harmony with your own spirit. This is the early stage of the grand reality the universe has been holding for you, waiting for the moment you would stop accepting crumbs and begin preparing to receive something greater. There is a rare and delicate moment in the healing journey when you begin to sense that the life you have been carrying inside you is far larger than the life you have been living. This recognition does not come with fanfare or dramatic revelation. It arrives in quiet waves, often during moments of solitude when distractions fall away and the truth has room to speak. It may come when you catch yourself longing for a future that feels more aligned, more expansive, more honest. It may appear when you finally admit that the version of you who settled for emotional fragments, incomplete relationships, or unfulfilling routines no longer reflects the person you are becoming. This internal shift signals the beginning of a profound transformation, the realization that your soul is ready to update the emotional architecture that once kept you small. Every individual carries an internal map made of beliefs, memories, and emotional impressions. This map guides decisions long before they become conscious choices. If your map was shaped during periods of abandonment, criticism, or emotional scarcity, then your internal directions naturally point you toward environments that match those familiar patterns. Manifestation becomes challenging because you are attempting to call in a reality that your internal system does not yet recognize as safe. Even desires that feel deeply authentic can trigger resistance if they conflict with the map you have been operating from for years. This is why people often say they want abundance, love, or freedom, yet unconsciously choose situations that limit their growth. The problem is not a lack of desire, but an outdated emotional blueprint. Transforming this blueprint is not an intellectual exercise. It is an emotional recalibration that requires compassion, patience, and honesty. You must begin by recognizing the beliefs that shaped your understanding of what you deserve. These beliefs often originate in childhood or early adulthood, during moments when you learn to equate love with effort, attention with sacrifice, or success with exhaustion. They became protective mechanisms in an environment where emotional survival felt more important than authenticity. But as you grow spiritually and emotionally, these mechanisms no longer serve you. They begin to feel heavy, restrictive, and misaligned with the person you are becoming. To update this internal framework, you must first allow yourself to acknowledge the grief that comes with realizing how long you lived beneath your own potential. This grief is tender and often layered. It may carry memories of relationships where you gave more than you received, opportunities you dismissed because you felt unworthy, or dreams you silenced because they seemed too large for your current reality. Grief is not a sign of weakness. It is proof that you are awakening. It shows that you are no longer numb to your own inner truth. When you allow yourself to feel this grief without drowning in it, you begin to reclaim the parts of you that were abandoned in the process of survival. Through this emotional honesty, a new quality of self-recognition emerges. You start to see yourself not as someone who failed, but as someone who adapted. This shift is crucial because it allows you to release shame while embracing responsibility for your future. You begin to understand that you cannot fully manifest a life you do not believe you deserve. Worthiness becomes the silent foundation on which every manifestation rests. Expanding this foundation involves creating practices that reinforce your sense of belonging in the life you wish to build. This may include setting gentler boundaries, cultivating moments of stillness, or choosing environments that honor your emotional depth. These practices are not duties. They are acts of self-respect that gradually update your internal map. As this transformation unfolds, you may notice subtle changes in your emotional landscape. Situations that once felt familiar begin to feel uncomfortable. People who relied on your self-abandonment may become uneasy as your energy shifts. Patterns that once repeated with precision may lose their power. This discomfort is often misinterpreted as a sign that something is wrong, but in truth, it is evidence that your inner world is reorganizing itself. You are no longer aligning with scarcity-based dynamics. Your energy is recalibrating, making room for a larger reality to enter. This phase requires trust, not blind optimism, but a grounded faith in the process of becoming. The universe does not withhold abundance or purpose. It simply matches the frequency you embody. When you stop accepting crumbs, you build a new relationship with your own energy, one in which your desires are no longer negotiable and your worth is no longer conditional. This alignment does not happen through force. It happens through consistency. Each time you choose emotional truth over emotional convenience, you reinforce a new internal message. You are ready for more. Eventually, this inner readiness becomes unmistakable. You begin to notice opportunities that resonate with your evolving sense of self. You encounter people who see you more clearly because you finally see yourself. You experience synchronicities that confirm the universe has heard your shift. And more importantly, you begin to trust the unfolding of your journey, knowing that the reality being prepared for you is not an illusion or a hopeful fantasy, but a reflection of the person you are steadily becoming. There comes a stage in every inward transformation when the world around you begins to feel strangely mismatched with the person you are becoming. You may notice yourself moving through familiar routines with an emerging sense of distance, as if the life you once built is now too small to hold the depth you are finally allowing yourself to feel. This sensation is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a profound indication that your inner frequency is shifting long before your external circumstances catch up. It often begins subtly. What once felt acceptable now feels heavy. What once seemed tolerable now feels misaligned. The roles you played for years no longer fit, not because the world changed, but because you did. This internal expansion is the natural result of no longer betraying yourself for the comfort of others. As you grow, your energy becomes more refined, and refinement naturally disrupts patterns that were built on self-minimization. This transition can feel disorienting because it challenges the emotional habits that once made you feel safe. When you start choosing honesty over compliance and alignment over approval, your nervous system may initially interpret this shift as danger. Old fears resurface, whispering that your desires are unrealistic, your intuition unreliable, or your boundaries too demanding. These fears are remnants of a past identity trying to regain control. They are not signs of regression. They are echoes of the version of you who survived by staying small. Understanding this allows you to move through discomfort without abandoning yourself again. A significant part of this journey is learning to sit with the empty spaces that appear when you stop accepting crumbs. These spaces often feel like silence, but they are actually invitations. Invitations to reconnect with your essence, to listen to the messages your soul has been holding for years, and to rediscover the parts of you that were hidden beneath noise, urgency, and emotional conditioning. Many people fear these spaces because they mistake solitude for loneliness. In truth, these pauses are portals. They create room for clarity to emerge, and clarity is the foundation of manifestation. A cluttered inner world cannot hold a grander reality. It can only repeat what feels familiar. When you allow these spaces to exist without rushing to fill them, something extraordinary begins to unfold. Your internal landscape becomes more receptive, your intuition sharpens, and your desires become more coherent. You start to differentiate between what your soul wants and what your fears demand. Fear desires control, predictability, and familiarity. The soul desires authenticity, expansion, and truth. When you stop negotiating with fear and begin honoring the quiet wisdom of your inner voice, your entire relationship with manifestation shifts. You stop trying to force outcomes and begin aligning with the version of yourself who naturally attracts what you once chased. This alignment is not built on affirmations spoken from desperation or techniques performed mechanically. It is built on the sacred act of choosing yourself over the patterns that once defined you. Each time you honor your emotional truth, you weaken the internal narrative that told you crumbs were all you could have. Each time you allow yourself to receive something nourishing, whether emotional or spiritual, you expand your capacity to receive more. Manifestation is not a technique, it is a state of being. It is the gradual process of becoming someone who no longer views abundance as an exception, but as a natural extension of who they are. One of the most transformative shifts occurs when you realize that the universe responds to your energy, not your wishes. Many people believe they are being spiritually tested or ignored when their manifestations do not arrive. In reality, the universe is merely mirroring the internal signals you emit. If your energy carries doubt, resentment, or unworthiness, then the experiences that show up will reflect those states. But when your energy begins to carry steadiness, clarity, and self-respect, the reality around you must adjust. This is not mysticism, it is resonance. Everything you attract is a reflection of what you believe you can hold. As your internal field becomes more coherent, you may notice situations unfolding with an ease that once felt impossible. You recognize opportunities more quickly. You attract relationships that feel grounded and reciprocal. You feel less reactive and more intentional. This shift does not happen because you forced life to bend to your will. It happens because you began living in a way that is congruent with your desires. When your inner and outer worlds align, manifestation becomes less about obtaining and more about allowing. This chapter marks an essential turning point in your journey. You are no longer examining the patterns that kept you small. You are stepping into the deeper work of embodying the person you are becoming. Embodiment is the stage where knowledge transforms into lived experience. It is where you stop analyzing your worth and start living from it. It is where you trust your intuition not because it feels comfortable, but because it feels true. In this stage, you begin to see that you are not just learning how to manifest, you are learning how to exist in a state of alignment that naturally attracts everything the universe has prepared for you. There is a moment, often quiet and almost imperceptible, when the journey inward reaches a turning point. It happens when you look at your life with a clarity you did not have before and realize that the patterns you once accepted no longer match the person you are becoming. This realization is not born from frustration or disappointment, but from a deeper and more grounded understanding that your spirit has always held a larger vision for you. The smallness you carried was never a reflection of your truth, but a reflection of the environments, experiences, and emotional landscapes that once shaped your sense of what was possible. Now, as you step into a more conscious relationship with yourself, you begin to recognize that your desires are not indulgences. They are directions. They are the compass points guiding you toward alignment, depth, purpose, and expansion. The journey of manifestation is not linear, and it is not meant to be rushed. It is a gradual unfolding, a return to the wisdom you once silenced and the courage you once doubted. You are learning to move through life with a new kind of awareness, one that does not depend on external approval, fear-based habits, or inherited limitations. Instead, you are learning to trust the quiet intelligence of your intuition, the resilience of your heart, and the steady pull of the life you were always meant to live. This process requires patience, presence, and a willingness to choose alignment, even when it challenges old comfort zones. But as you continue to release the patterns that kept you small, you create space for a reality that mirrors the fullness of your worth. You are no longer someone who settles for emotional fragments or temporary validation. You are becoming someone who honors their truth, protects their energy, and welcomes experiences that resonate with authenticity and soul. The grand reality the universe is preparing for you does not arrive through force or desperation. It arrives through coherence. When your thoughts, emotions, and actions align with the person you are meant to be, manifestation stops being a distant hope and becomes an inevitable outcome. This is your invitation to step into that alignment with clarity, courage, and a deep sense of belonging in your own life. Before you go, sit with this question for a moment, not as an idea but as an inner truth rising to the surface. If you truly believed you were worthy of everything you long for, how differently would you begin living your life today? The answer to this question is the doorway to your next chapter, and stepping through it is an act of courage only you can take. If this message resonated with the deepest part of you, I invite you to subscribe to this channel so you can continue walking this path of transformation with guidance, clarity, and support. And before you leave, stay with me a little longer. On your screen now, you will see another video chosen specifically to help you continue expanding your consciousness, healing your inner world, and aligning with the life that has been waiting for you. Press play and continue your journey.